Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through my process of drawing faces. This isn't really a tutorial, I'm just going to be showing you how I go about drawing a semi-realistic face. I'm going to be breaking this video down into 10 tips that will hopefully help you out if you're a beginner. My first tip is to choose a good reference. What I mean by this is don't choose one that already confuses you a bit, because then your drawing is probably going to not turn out as clear as you'd like it to be. That doesn't mean it can't be interesting though. I like to go for reference photos that capture my attention and has something unique about it. For example, with the drawing that I've already done, that's on the left, he has flowers on his eyes, which I thought was a really cool concept. And for the one I'm doing now, it's not that deep, I just like the hat. Okay, so let's say you've picked your reference now. The next tip that I have is to start light. This is a really important tip because you don't want to get to the point where you've been pressing too hard and you've made a mistake and you can't rub it out. Because that will just leave you with either like a ghost of an image behind your new one, or you're going to have to try and work around that mistake, which is probably going to make the drawing process a lot less enjoyable. And oftentimes when you're drawing portraits, I feel like a lot of people lose motivation or just get kind of bored, which I can definitely relate to. A lot of people would find it a lot more interesting to design characters or draw cool outfits and stuff, which I totally get. But then you kind of avoid drawing realistically, which is actually really good practice for whatever type of art style you have. So that leads me on to my third tip, which is to use fun mediums and just make it fun. So you can see I'm using a Prismacolor col-erase pencil because I find sketching in colour to be more fun than boring graphite. And you can see my other drawing, I added some nice like highlighter doodles in the background, and I did like orange and blue because they're complementary colours, and I had fun with the composition. And for this drawing I'm doing a blue drawing and then orange background so it contrasts. So there are a lot of things you can do to make drawing portraits or faces fun. But you might be like, okay, I get it, I'll draw portraits, they're not boring, it's just that I can't draw them. And I will admit they're very hard at first because you don't really know where to start. And my first portraits, and some of them now as well definitely, were a bit rough, and I definitely think practice is the way to get better. But these next few tips will hopefully give you an idea of where to start. So I would definitely say to do this, and tip number 4 is to use guidelines. When I start drawing a portrait, I usually draw a circle and then a line down the centre of the face, and then I also go for a line where the eyes will be, and I from then mark where the nose and the mouth will be, and even the ears if I'm feeling adventurous. And that may sound like a lot, but I really don't mean go into detail. I'm literally just saying draw some lines where you think it'll go. Because I think guidelines help you pinpoint early on what's wrong with your drawing, because if you're thinking, oh, something doesn't look quite right, and then you look back at your guidelines and then you see something was slightly off, like the eyes were way too high or something, it's more easier to do that with guidelines because they're in the simplest form and it's very clear what's going where. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but I hope you guys are getting what I'm trying to say, because I clearly can't explain anything. And now I think this is going to be the most important tip so far, well, maybe apart from start light. But tip number 5 is to use shapes and think about form. You don't want to be drawing what's in your head a flat image. You want to think about it in 3D if you can, which I know is really hard and really hard to get used to. But one way to think about it is try and make every feature into like a 3D shape, and obviously then you can like join the shapes together for certain features. Like with the nose, if you imagine a sphere in the middle and then a sort of like rectangle pyramid thing for the nose bridge, and imagine it's got some volume to it, so obviously the sides are going to be darker and then the top is going to be lighter, because if you think about which parts are higher, that's the bit where the light's going to be hitting. And the same with the lips, remember that they come out of the face, so the top lip will be darker because it's not getting the light from above, and they have some volume to them, so the ends of the lips will be darker than the centre bit. If you're struggling with form and using shapes to break features down, there's loads of guides on Pinterest. I'm definitely not the best at explaining this bit, so maybe search up some tutorials on how to break features down into shapes. But we're just going to move on to the next tip, which is to cover up parts of your drawing as you're drawing them. So say for example, if I covered up the left eye of the drawing that I'm doing right now, and then looking at the right eye, I would imagine where the left eye would be. Then I would uncover the left eye, and if it's not in the place where I was imagining it to be, I would move it to that place. Because if you're looking at the same drawing for a really long time, it'll be really hard to tell what's wrong when you've been looking at it for so long. Okay, so my next tip is to not quit at the ugly stage. Maybe you're in the middle of a drawing and it doesn't look anything like what you were expecting it to look like. But the truth is, every drawing has an ugly stage, especially portraits. And it's really important that you try and stick through to the end of the drawing. Like right now, mine is not looking all that great. If you find that you keep getting to the same place and then not liking it and then rubbing it out and starting again, just try and keep going, even if it looks terrible, even if it looks nothing like your reference and it barely even looks like a human, which I know we've all experienced at one point. Don't burn yourself out, but also try to stick through the end, have some commitment and just keep going. Okay, so our next tip, although I'm not quite there at this stage yet in the drawing, is to mark out your deepest shadows. So when I start blending, I mean, this probably isn't like the best tip. There's probably other ways you could go about this. But when I'm doing a quick portrait that I don't want to take any more than like half an hour, and I don't really care about really smooth blending or anything, I find that the best thing that works for me is marking out my deepest shadows. Because even if I don't blend everything out seamlessly, and even if I don't do like a full gradient of values, you can still tell what's going on in the drawing and you can still get a sense of form, which again is really important in a portrait drawing. This drawing took me 40 minutes and I think I was able to get it done in 40 minutes because I wasn't really bothered about making the blending neat. I was just trying to get it down there and make it look like everything's not just a flat image. So even if it looks like messy scribbling at the start, I personally find that that's the best way for me to shade portraits quickly. Okay, and my next tip, which is tip number 9, is kind of similar to the last tip. And it's to work with values and don't waste too much time blending. And don't get me wrong, I definitely think that blending is really useful and it's really effective when drawing faces. But if you're not aiming for something really perfect and realistic, I think that just working with values and trying to get down your darks and lights is more important. You can definitely go back and blend afterwards, which is what I usually do, but I would start with getting down the values in the right places. Because then you can decide at the end how much more you want to render your portrait. And make sure you're looking back to your reference image for help with putting the shadows and the highlights where they're supposed to go. And my final tip is to incorporate things from your style that you like. As I've already said, portraits don't need to be really realistic if that's not what you're going for. Mine definitely aren't super realistic, they're more stylized. I like to include little things from my usual style when I'm colouring with markers and designing characters, like the way I draw highlights or hair. And I'm just going to also quickly say that I think that this portrait probably isn't the best example of the blending tip, because I think the pressure of camera was kind of making me nervous that it wasn't going well. So I tried to blend it first to make it look better for you guys, but I do usually start with just kind of scribbling. As I said at the start of this video, this isn't the right way to draw portraits. There's probably some little things wrong about this. And I'm definitely not an expert, as you can tell. This was just my way of drawing portraits. And not all of these tips might work for all of you. So the best thing to do is probably just experiment and see what works best when you're drawing faces. You might be thinking there's only a minute of the video left and I'm not very far into the portrait, but basically my camera just stopped recording. And of course I only realised this when I'd basically finished. So that's why the speed draw was actually not that sped up. It was only wait, let me check. 2 times speed. but I thought at least you'd get to see me do the finishing touches, but it happened again like 30 seconds afterwards, and I definitely should have checked if it was still recording, but I didn't. So I finished the whole drawing thinking I was recording, but I wasn't. All I did was finishing the shading and adding the background so it kind of matched the other page, which I just used highlighters for them, pastel highlighters. I did flowers on the left because I thought they would match the flowers on his eyes, and then I just did stars because, you know, why not? Here are the shout outs for this video, by the way, and the shout out emoji. And I hope this video was helpful in some way. I know I'm not the best at explaining, but hopefully at least one tip in this video was useful to you. And I'm still very much a beginner myself. I just wanted to help any of you guys who are looking for a place to start. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!